Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dave.
Couldn't hear you there, look, Drew.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I have that it's 12:30 right on the dot. So we'll maybe give it a few more minutes before I pass it over to David. But I want to thank everyone for coming. I do want to remind you that this is being recorded. I so far have only shared them with other articling agrologists that are looking for examples, but we do have the YouTube channel up and running now. So there is a chance it may be shared. If you are against that, please send me an email so I know not to share it. And the one other thing is I wanted to make sure that we do have agrologists on this meeting that are willing to assess it and that they have the form.
Katie, do you need somebody else?
We usually like to have one or two, like 2 or 3 works really well, but
If you send me the form, I can
okay.
assess, sorry.
I will do that right now. Okay. And with that, I will pass it over to David. We will be doing questions at the end, so please hold them if you can. And we are going to try to keep this meeting to about 45 minutes, just so everybody has time expectations.
Gotcha. So do I have the ability to share my screen?
You should, but I can make you the host, so that way I know for sure that you do.
Huh.
It'll be at the bottom. On my screen, it shows up as being green and the other icons are all white.
How's that?
Perfect.
You got it? How do I, hang on a second. I'm going to stop sharing for a second, put this onto a different screen so that I'm, okay. Sure. View. Okay, anybody help me out here? I'm in PowerPoint. I just want to do a slide, show the slideshow, and it's showing
PowerPoint to
up.
slideshow, and then choose either a window or a screen. Those are different.
Ah, We're gonna make it work. Never mind. Okay. 1 second. Okay. You get to see this particular screen, and I apologize if it's.
If you click on the top where it says from beginning, the very first one, that should be what you're looking for, and then you can go with your arrow keys.
Okay, so I click on that, and that's what happens on the current slide. File. Slideshow. Home. Slideshow. Maybe I should hit the rehearse here, just be so that I can. Anyway, can you see?
We can see it, that's fine.
Okay. So welcome everybody. So my name is Dave Orosz, former professional agrologist, looking to get back into things here again. So I have spent, I'll do a little bit of a quick introduction here first. So I live in the Windsor, Essex County area. I live in Windsor. I worked for Farm Credit Canada for 33 plus years. And I was a senior relationship manager for them, retired last fall. So given where I'm located, I've spent a lot of time interacting in, lending in, dealing with the greenhouse vegetable industry. And so since I've retired, I've set up a consulting business. And so I do a little bit of consulting in the greenhouse vegetable marketplace. So when it came around to trying to figure out what to put into a presentation here, I figured I'd give a bit of an overview about greenhouse vegetables, a bit of a financial perspective. And so I hope you guys enjoy this. I would say that there'll be lots of time for questions at the end, and so we should be able to make that work for all of us. So I'm just moving something onto a screen here. So I will move ahead to slide number 2, if I can possibly do this. I hate this thing already. So greenhouse. So this is a picture of a greenhouse out of Leamington. Typical commercial greenhouse operation. This one happens to be lighted. One thing I'm going to say to you all is that you're going to see a bunch of numbers in that here today. All of that pertains to non-lit greenhouse production. I guess just as a little bit of background, traditional vegetable production in Ontario, in Canada, plantings of, so for tomatoes and peppers, those would be the tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers are the main vegetable crops that you're going to see out there. Strawberries are kind of a newcomer, and although they're not vegetables, there's still a bunch of those out there, and I would throw them into the same sort of basket. So tomatoes and peppers would be planted on January 1st, roughly, beginning of the year. You're going to grow that crop for an entire year, pick off of that crop until the following November-ish, end of November, clean that crop out, and you're going to replant again the next January. So it's an annual crop cycle. Cucumbers are a bit different. Cucumbers, you're going to do anywhere between 3 and 5 crops a year. And it's more of a continuous cropping type of a deal. The reason that traditionally we don't have fruit in November, December, January sort of time period is there's not enough light at our latitude to be able to set fruit and be able to effectively produce in that time period. That's why there's been the move towards lights. There's also a bit of because of that, there's a bit of a premium with the marketplace for lighted crops in the wintertime. Everything that I'm going to be talking about today is going to be everything that I'm going to be talking about today is going to be, again, non-lit type of production. So let's talk about a typical commercial operation. Things have grown over the years. I spent 25 years lending into that sector. You know, back in the day, there would be a 3-acre startup. So 3 acres, 130,000 square feet roughly. Today, a startup size is probably in the 25-acre type of ballpark. And typically somebody's going to be looking on how to get to somewhere between 50 and 100 acres out of that facility in order to make it kind of the best commercial viability. So what do you need to be able to put this thing up? You need land that you're going to put this greenhouse on. Typically, I would say today you're looking for 100 to 200 acres. Probably 200 would be better because kind of an optimum layout is going to be probably in the ballpark of 100 acres of greenhouse. So what do you need to be able to have that? You need lots of electricity. Some electricity if you're going to be, so like between half a meg and 1 megawatt of 3-phase power, if you're going to just have traditional production. If you are going to put in lights, you need an additional 0.3 to 0.5 megawatts per acre in order to light up those lights. These things with lights are very, very large users of electricity. You need a heating source. Typically, that's going to be natural gas. That's going to be the most reasonable. You need a lot of gas. So 150,000 cubic meters of gas on an annual basis, 6,000 gigajoules. To put that into perspective, your house is going to typically use, in Ontario, is going to use roughly 90 gigajoules of fuel per year. So that's a lot of houses. So that, again, that's on a per acre basis. The other thing you need is you need a lot of fresh water. So the peak requirements are going to be in the summertime.
Over there.
And so you're going to need 25,000 liters. So that's roughly 6,000 gallons per acre per day. To put that into a little bit of perspective, I remember working that out one time. It's almost half an inch of water over the entire greenhouse every day. It's just a lot of water. And so typically people, at least in this neck of the woods, would be using town water for that sort of thing. So let me talk a little bit about how you would lay a greenhouse out. Here's a typical greenhouse operation. So what you see here, and you'll hopefully be able to see my cursor here a little bit, these are two 25-acre blocks located on roughly 150 acres worth of land. At the front, you're going to see a very large, well, a reasonably large packing and service building to be able to run the facility. There's going to be a lot of automation in there in order to keep costs down. Down the center here, you'll see there's a service corridor. So this place is laid out to be able to have 2 more blocks on the other side of that service corridor. Up here, up front, the majority of the labor that you're going to see in the greenhouse business is going to be offshore, temporary foreign workers. So you're going to, so these are offshore housing facilities. And these 2 things that you see right here, those are large water storage tanks for holding hot water, which is part of the heating system. So that's kind of what a typical layout would look like. So what does it look like inside? So typical, so here's a place lit up. So you're gonna have a long walkway down the middle. You're gonna have rows that extend onto either side of that. So you're gonna have glass or plastic as the roof. Typically these days it tends to be glass. You'll have heat retention screens that will be up at the top. You may have grow lights. If you do have grow lights, you're gonna need blackout curtains. Because the neighbors don't particularly like a lot of light that's shining on them all night. What you see here is there's a hanging trough system. So that trough hangs from the ceiling. The plants, the hydroponic bags sit on top of that. The plants, and there's wires up at the top that with strings that those plants are hanging from. There's a fertilization and water delivery system. So there's individual spaghetti that goes to the bottom of all those bags. There's a CO2 delivery system because these places eat up a lot of CO2. And so typically what you're going to do is you're going to run your boilers during the daytime, and you're going to pump the stack gases. You're going to pump CO2 into there in order to enhance production. Misting systems are becoming more the norm. So there'll be a heat delivery system. So there's a heat line that's right through the middle of the crop there, and then down on the floor you'll see that there's rails, and so that heating system. So those are hot water rails, and what they do is they provide not only for the delivery of heat, but it's also a rail system that carts can run on to be able to manage the crop. So those are kind of, you're going to have computerized climate control system that's going to control 100% of the climate. You're going to have a computerized labor management system that's going to record and keep track of where all the labor is. You're going to have scissor carts. You're going to have picking carts. So those sort of things. Service buildings, you're going to need a reasonable amount of service building. So this is at the end of that particular greenhouse. So what we've got here is we've got fertilizer tanks. There'll be like day tanks. So I wouldn't call those day tanks. Those are fertilizer tanks. And at the end, what you can see is you can see some larger, they look like grain bins, but they're water silos. So there'll be freshwater storage. There'll be leach that comes back. These things are 100% closed loop systems. So the system is going to feed water to the plants. One of those things those troughs do, back in the previous picture, one of the things these troughs do is that's one too far, is to collect the leachate. So every time they water, they're going to overwater by between 10 and 30%. That helps to make sure that no salts in that accumulate in the bags. So you need all that sort of stuff. You need injectors to put that the fertilizers into the irrigation system. You need offices. You need service areas. You need storage. You need boilers, and so large heating boilers. And what you can see off the top here, there's it's basically a big radiator that cools down those stack gases and be able so that you can inject those into the greenhouse. And you need spots to repair things. You need that sort of stuff as well. So, and here you need to, on site, typically there's going to be a pack line. So you're going to pick into carts of some sort and then run the whatever product it is through a packing line. And so that when the product leaves the facility, it's generally in a format that's adequate for whatever retailer. There are some times that there's additional packaging that happens after the fact, but let's say more the norm today is that it's going to leave. So pallet stackers, box makers, automatic grading machines that are going to put in exactly the right weight, wrappers, pallet, so all that sort of stuff. So that's a little bit of what you're looking at here. So let's talk a little bit about what the capital cost is for one of these places. Not unlike very many things out in the world today, capital costs are kind of through the roof. They've gone up quite a bit here especially in the last 3 years, but it's been a steady rise over the last number of years. So what's it going to cost you to build this place? So again, we're talking about so buy 100 acres, say at $25,000 an acre, you've got $2.5 million invested. So I'm just lumping everything else together: greenhouse, service buildings, equipment, to bring those services in from the road or for wherever it is that you have to bring them in from. Offshore housing, it's all part of a package and it's all part of it. So, and I'm estimating this as a cost right today. Again, this is no lights, but ballpark $1.7 million an acre. So 25 acres, we're calling this a 25-acre startup. The next 25 that you build is probably going to be a couple $100,000 an acre cheaper than that, because you've already got a whole bunch of the infrastructure in place. But so we've got a total of a $45 million investment is the capital investment. And so let's talk about how does this thing get financed, right? So we've got a capital cost of $45 million. So let's say the bank is going to be, you're going to be happy with you as a risk and all that sort of good stuff. So they're going to finance 75% of that. So that's $33.75 million. Today, we're looking at an interest rate, you know, if you're going to lock in for 5 years, you're going to be in the ballpark of 5%. Let's say we're going to amortize this thing over 20 years, which is fairly typical. So we've got an annual payment of about $2.7 million. The owner himself is coming up with $11.25 million, 25% of that. And as I've got a note on the bottom here, don't forget that there's a working capital requirement here. So there's going to be a planting, and then from that point, the crop needs to grow for a certain period of time. Plus, you've got a lot of expenses up front, especially there's a lot. That's where the majority of the heat is, and that's where all the majority of the crop costs, seeds and plants and all that sort of stuff are going to go into it. Roughly $100,000 an acre. So in addition to getting, you know, $33 million worth of bank financing, you also need to finance this $2.5 million of working capital that you're going to need for the operation. I'm going to take you back a little bit. So let's say, this is part of, I'm just going to do a little bit of a comparison with the profitability of this now compared to what it was. So 5 years ago, the capital cost was probably more in the $1.2 million ballpark. So if we look at that at the time, $24 million to was 75%. Interest rates were a little bit lower. They were about 4%. I was taking a look at the Bank of Canada site earlier today just to see if that was relatively accurate, and I think it is. Again, amortized over 20 years, but now we've got an annual payment of only $1.8 million, and the owner only needed to come up with a little over $8 million in order to get this thing off the ground. So let's look at income and expenses. So I'm not going to go into any huge detail on this, but so if we talk about today, whether it's today or 5 years ago, crop prices are roughly the same. Production is roughly the same. There's been small changes in things, but not really enough to worry about. So $320,000 an acre times 25 acres. So we're talking about $8 million of annual gross revenue out of this place. Expenses are up a little bit today compared to what they were a couple years ago. And interestingly enough, so I actually went through this in a lot of detail with one of my customers recently because their financial institution was really concerned. You know, we all know that the price of fertilizer is up 100%. We all know that lots of costs are up. But interestingly, though, those costs, some of those costs are relatively minor for a greenhouse operation. Now, so what I'm saying is it was gonna, at that point, it was probably $200,000 an acre for expenses. Today, it's about 220. There's a caveat to that though. So if you were to go out and buy natural gas, so gas out of those expenses is probably about $40,000. Let's see, now we used 6,000 GJs. Actually, it's closer to $30,000. So if you were to buy gas today, it's in the $10 a GJ kind of ballpark. That's an extra 20 or 30,000 bucks. The majority of existing operations have gas locked up for 2 or 3 years. The price for gas 2 or 3 years out is up from what it was. It was $5 a GJ. Now it's probably in the ballpark of 6 or 6.25 if you're going to book 3 years out. So so that's a bit of a caveat to this. But besides that, so as you see here, the bottom line, net operational income today, roughly $100,000 an acre. It was more like $120,000 an acre. So it's costing you more to build the place. You're actually returning a little bit less. So let's look a little bit at return on investment. So today we've got a capital cost of $45 million. 5 years ago, we had a capital cost of 32.5. Net operational income. So the owner's investment is a little bit less back a few years ago because just the overall place cost less. Net operational income of $2.5 million today, and it was $3 million. Payments. So the payment on that mortgage is 2.7. It was 1.8. I'll talk about a maintenance capex here. It's essentially that's just if you want to maintain what you've got in the first couple years, if it's brand new, no, it's not going to cost you anything. It shouldn't cost you much at all for maintenance, as far as for a capex. But realistically, over time, it's going to be roughly $10,000 an acre just to make sure you're maintaining stuff. So as far as residual cash flow, and I'm not talking about taxes. I'm not talking about, let's just keep this simple. Payments, capex, residual cash flow. Today it's about negative $450,000 is what it's returning. 5 years ago, it was closer to $1 million. And as you see there, as far as return on investment, today is a little bit negative. Historically, it was a pretty good return on investment. So anyway, so that honestly is, we're getting close to the end of what I had prepared for you guys. A couple other comments that I'm going to make is that if you're going to go out and build a greenhouse, there's a number of other things to keep in mind. You've got gas contracts and deposits for gas companies. You've got labor availability is probably one of your number one sort of things. And if I look at the majority of the greenhouse operations, regardless of where they're located in Ontario, offshore labor is probably the number one source, and probably the lion's share. 70, 80, 90% of the labor that's on the place. You've got permitting issues, you've got construction timelines, you've got construction delays. You need to make sure you've got sales contracts and you've got places to sell this stuff. But those are all other things that you need to be concerned about. So I am at the end of this, and so I'm going to stop sharing and ask if there's any questions.
Yeah, hi, David. It's Gary Eagleson here. Can you hear me?
I can, Gary.
Yeah, I did consulting in greenhouse. It's just one of the greenhouses of every size and description. It's interesting, the 5-year comparison. Why would somebody build something from scratch today with the numbers you're using? Like, what would their reasoning be?
So good question, Gary. So I think if you look at a fair bit of what's being built today, it's being built by marketers. And so I'm going to say that there's probably 3 different reasons right today. One is that things are being built by marketers, and when marketers are building, they're trying to they have other income sources other than the greenhouse that are going on. They've got the sales side that's in the background. They're trying to make sure that they've got a base of production that they have locked up, and then there's a little bit of a multiplier effect on top of that as far as the product that they're moving for other people. So that's one answer. A fair bit of the construction that's been going on is lit. The numbers actually get a bit better when you've got lights involved with the operation. It's still pretty thin right today. Another reason is if you have an existing operation and you have fairly low debt levels with it, you can write these things off pretty darn quickly. And so if you have an existing profitable operation, it's very typical for, I think, for agriculture in general. If you have an existing profitable operation and that you're paying a fair bit of income tax on, then continuing to build delays that tax, kicks that down the road. And so from that perspective, it's that's another reason. So I would say some of what's being built is actually, you know, there's a fair bit that's being built today for strawberries. The profitability today in strawberries is better than this. Also depends on what kind of production you're getting out. There's some people that are chasing some specialties a bit, and then looking for, you know, premium returns on that sort of stuff. So those would be the answers. Does that answer
Sure.
your question, Gary?
Yeah, sure. I have a technology that I could actually, what's your phone number, Dave, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you?
My phone number is 519-996-0122.
Okay. I was just wondering what they do with their organic waste at the end of the season. Do they just compost it, or what do most people do with it?
So actually what happens to the majority of it, it gets landfilled. And that's not that environmentally friendly, of course. There's a few reasons for that. One is, and one of the main ones is diseases and pests. So currently there is a pretty debilitating disease that's out there in the tomato marketplace called brown rugose tomato brown rugose tabama virus. And so it's something that was discovered in Israel back about 5 or 6 years ago, and it is spread across the world since. It is in, I would estimate that it's probably in just about every tomato operation and tomato field across the world now. And it's a really debilitating disease. And it's one that's very, very hard to get rid of. We've also run into issues if back 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, there was a pepper weevil that infected a bunch of the pepper places, and so in order to make sure that wasn't just overwintering in some compost pile or right out beside another greenhouse, they asked that all that stuff be landfilled. There's also a certain amount of plastics, whether it's clips or whether it's strings, that are in a lot of that product, and that's a challenge as far as being able to recycle that or compost it. Can be gotten around, but especially for a year-long crop, if you start using jute or some sort of other type of compostable type product for those strings, then you end up with crop falling down and that sort of stuff.
Okay. Well, I could mention another thing. This technology is a low temperature pyrolysis unit.
Mm-hmm.
Which actually has a furnace. It's not high temperature, it's low temperature, so it's 600 degrees centigrade. And then there's a combustion chamber next to it that goes up to 1900 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in discussions right now with some municipalities where they would divert their organic waste into this system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the areas where I think it would be very good is in the greenhouse industry because of what we've been talking about. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a call later and I'll discuss it with you.
I appreciate that, Gary. I know they're always looking for something that's different from what they're doing. There's nobody that's really happy about landfilling it.
No.
But it seems to be a bit of a necessary evil these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, so alternatives would be very welcome.
Yeah. And it turns out, depending on the size of the system you put in there, anywhere from 0.8 to 20 megawatts of power. So,
Oh, that's, yeah, decent size for sure.
yeah, okay.
Other questions?
Just to introduce myself, I'm Julie Payan and I work in Ottawa for the Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Canada. And I work as a national coordinator for the greenhouse vegetable industry, actually, and it's really nice to meet you. I appreciate your presentation, and I think from my perspective, your numbers are great, and what I hear as well. Some of the issues you've spoken to is certainly what I'm hearing as well. I guess in terms of a question, I guess maybe along the same lines for the next alternatives and options for greenhouse. We certainly are aware of the impact on the bottom line from the carbon price, but also on the environment. And how to reduce emissions is certainly a work in progress. But moving away, at least in areas like Ontario, where natural gas is the source of the carbon dioxide that the plants need, and the heat, obviously, to produce food year round is hard to transition away from. So I think, anyway, it would be very interesting to see another 5-year forecast on these numbers might look very different again. But I do know and recognize here from our membership that those costs do impact their bottom lines, and that is the trick is carbon pricing, I suppose, has motivational behavioral changes as rationale behind it, but when you need the carbon dioxide and you need heat as a production source that ties you to that fuel source, that energy source, it's very interesting to see and hear from the financial side of things on how that plays out from a grower's investment side of things as well. So thank you for today.
You're welcome, Julie. I see Drew has his hand up.
Yes, I just had a question on your forecast. I go to the store and I see tomatoes, for example, peppers up 30, 40, 50, 60% over the last 3 years, and your numbers are showing no more returns to the producer. So what are you hearing about the opportunities for the producer of these products to get their fair share of the value at retail?
Good question, Drew. And so constant source of irritation, I think, and I see the same thing you do. I was down in, a month ago, I was down in Ohio at an Aldi store, and Aldi being a bit of a discount chain down in the States, seeing seeing 12 ounces, so 3/4 of a pound going for $2.49, and knowing that some of the guys that I deal with were at the same time getting 50 cents a pound out of, or 45 cents a pound out of that stuff. Prices were actually quite depressed. It appears that that the chains have chosen to are choosing to kind of take some market rents out of things these days. There's no question that there's more room in there for the producers to be able to receive more, and they need to. And because if they don't get more out of things, especially with some of the price increases that we're seeing now, if they don't get more out, it's going to be difficult for them to continue. So there's marketing is a bit fractured within the sector. There are a number of bigger players that are out there. but there's still a lot of players in the marketing game, and it seems to be challenging to get everyone to work together. I think to a certain extent, the retailers are using that. They're playing off different marketers against each other and using that as a way to drive down their costs while at the same time leaving prices pretty high in the stores. So there's certainly work to be done there. There's room for improvement, and there's a need for improvement there. So that's unfortunately all I've got for right now.
But I just think it's important that production for food essentials remains in Canada where it's reasonable to remain in Canada. We shouldn't depend on Mexico, California, Arizona, and Florida for our main staples of fruits and vegetables if it's reasonably produced in Canada.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. It is interesting. One thing that, if we look at where all this product from Ontario goes, at least 75% of it goes to the US. That's the marketplace for. If we look at growth, and there has been a fair bit of growth in production area over the past number of years, the Canadian marketplace hasn't changed. So there's been increased amounts of exports that have occurred. So, any other questions? So I hope I see that there's going to be a video of this posted on YouTube at some point. So anyway, thank you very much for your time. I hope I passed the test. And anyways, so I opened a consulting business. So my business is which was on the first page of that thing. So DO Greenhouse Consulting Limited. And my website is, which is a work in progress, by the way, but at least you'll be able to find me, is Do Greenhouse, dogreenhouse.com. Thank you very much for your time. And I think I'm just under the wire for time here, right,
Yeah.
Katie?
You are. I don't know if my video is working or not, but
It is.
I want to thank you for your presentation. I've always joked with these that my background's in political science and the social sciences, so I learn something new every time I watch one of these presentations. And it definitely sounds like from the questions that, yeah, it was a great presentation. I thank you for your time. And I thank everyone for taking time at your lunch to come and watch and learn with us. If you are assessing him, please send me that assessment sheet in the next day or two. And I just want to remind everyone that we're doing another lunch and learn next Wednesday at 12:30, if that works for your schedule as well. And with that, I will let everyone carry on with their day. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Thanks.